Most of the people who click on this video, including you, think that this video is specifically for students and specialists in literature. But this is not the case, because literary criticism is about life. Hello guys, and welcome back to another video specifically about literary criticism. My name is Sohail, and if you are interested in topics related to literature, reading, literary criticism and so on, hit that subscribe button to watch my future videos as well. And today I'm going to recommend 5 books for the ones who want to start reading literary criticism. These books here are based on the order you should read them, from number 1 to number 5. No matter if you're a student, a common reader, or a professor in literature, these books will be helpful for you, and these books will give you the information, the basic information about literary criticism, and even more than that. Unfortunately, the disappointing fact is that most of the people think that literary criticism is only for students of literature, and it is only related to literary topics, writers, authors, and so on. And reading it and knowing about it won't be influential for the common people and their lives. But this is absolutely wrong. Literary criticism is the study of the ways of thinking and also the ways by which we look at the world around us. Knowing literary criticism gives you millions of visions to look at the world, and not knowing it means that you have a limited point of view and you look at this world from one or at most 2 perspectives and not more. Critical thinking can change your decisions, your ways of living, and also your reactions in a social group, for example, a country or a society. And people will understand that you are somehow different and you know more in comparison to them. And so they come to you. They want to know you, they ask questions from you, and they consult with you about different topics and different decisions they are going to make. And this literary criticism and this critical thinking makes you a kind of social figure for other people, and this is very significant. One more point, and then we will go to these great books of literary criticism. And this is my personal idea, because I think, and it might be wrong, I think literary criticism is an interdisciplinary approach, because it drives the ideas from philosophy, psychology, literature, and even mythology. And this is a spectacular feature to think about and also go for it. Now that we figure out about the significance and importance of literary criticism and critical thinking in general, the question is where to start reading literary criticism, and these 5 books here is the answer. The first book is Literary Criticism by Charles E. Bressler, published by Longman. This is studied in almost all universities in the world, because it is one of the best and basic books in reading literary criticism. This is perhaps the best book to start reading literary criticism. Just pay attention that these books here belong to the time when I was a student in English literature, and the covers may have changed throughout time. So if I see that the covers have changed, I will put the new cover somewhere like here or here. So you can see the new cover of the book being published. This book starts with defining the word criticism, theory, and literature, and then it goes on to a concise history of literary criticism from Plato to modern literary criticism we have today. The language is very simple, and big ideas are simply presented here. I really recommend this book for the beginners of literary criticism, because it is written for those people. And I remember that I read this book more than 10 times when I was the student of English literature, and this is a great choice because it is the introductory information about big ideas, for example, post-colonialism, feminism, Marxism, and so on. And also at the end of the book, we have some important and basic articles in literary criticism from big names, for example, Jacques Derrida, and so on. So put this book in your list. The second book is A Reader's Guide to Contemporary Literary Theory by Roman Seldon, also published by Longman. This is also one of the great basic books of literary criticism. This book moves further and explains literary critical approaches we have with more detailed information, and it also refers to the critics, the main critics we have in these approaches. For example, if I want to give you examples, for example, in the case of Marxist theories, we have Lukács and Brecht in this field. Also, we have, for example, in post-structuralist approaches, we have the ideas by Julia Kristeva, we have Michel Foucault, and also Jacques Lacan. These are the great critics we have in this book. This is still introductory, still to the surface, but it goes further and explains more about the literary figures and literary critical ideas in comparison to this first book by Bressler. The third book we have here is A Handbook of Critical Approaches to Literature by Wilfred Guerin, published by Oxford University Press. This is also one of the basic books in literary criticism, and I remembered that I studied this book for my exams during my university times, and I didn't really enjoy this book at that time, but some years later I read this again and I really learned from this book. One of the significant features that makes this book different from other books is that it is very well structured. It starts with traditional approaches coming to post-colonial studies. Each chapter has an order, a great order, and we see some key concepts, key ideas presented, key critics are discussed, and also after the theoretical information, it gives you examples from literary texts to somehow exercise for the task of criticizing. And this is one of the first books in literary criticism, if I'm not mistaken, that it talks about literary criticism in practice. And this is a very important feature, being well structured. This book, A Handbook of Critical Approaches to Literature, also talks about mythological and also archetypal approaches in literature, which we cannot find in the previous two books. This was the first book to start talking about these ideas, which is very important in the case of literary criticism and life generally. And the book number 4 is A Practical Introduction to Literary Theory and Criticism by Keith Booker, published again by Longman. This book is divided into 3 main sections. Each of them is a complete book for itself. Section 1 in this book talks about the general information as well as detailed explanations of approaches we have in literature and in literary criticism. Section 2 talks about how these approaches are applied to different texts and how we use these approaches to discuss the literary texts in the history. Section 3 talks about the discussion and analysis of different critics, well-known critics, about different texts and dramas and poetry. And you can see how these people, how these great critics do this task I mean the task of criticizing, and you can learn from them how to do this, how to criticize a piece of literature, and later on how to criticize your life. This is very important. Knowing these ideas is a part of the story. Another part of the story is how to apply them to your studies as well as your life. I have to say this is a complex book because first you need to go and read those literary texts and novels and poetries and dramas and so on, and then you need to come back and read the criticisms about them. It's very good, I think, point, because you read this book but simultaneously you have to read other books too, and this is somehow a great strategy the writer uses. And finally, the last book in my list is Modern Criticism and Theory by David Lodge, published again by Longman. This is a great publication, Longman, in the case of textbooks in literature and also English language. This is a very great publication, and 4 of these books are also from Longman. The important point here is that the previous 4 books I recommended were all about literature, about literary criticism, but this book is the literary criticism itself. It doesn't have explanations and informations about literary theories because it is the literary theory itself. It is the textbook. It is the original text of the articles done by a literary genius and critical figures we have in the history of literary criticism. This is a very valuable book, and David Lodge selected the best articles of literary criticism here. You can read it. This is a very complex book. It is obvious how complex it is. The language is very complex because it is written by the authors themselves, and believe me, the most complex kind of language belongs to the writers of modernism and the writers of literary criticism. This is a fact. And you will understand it after 3 or 4 years of reading literature. So, as I mentioned, understanding this book is a little bit problematic, and you may need a professor to explain about the ideas and concepts in this book. If you're a common reader, you can eliminate this book and you can choose not to read it. But if you're a professor or a student in literature, you have to read this and you have to pay a special attention to this, because this book is one of the bases of literary criticism, and you cannot ignore that. Well, this is the end of this important video, and I'm very happy that I finally created this one, because this topic is not only specifically for academic domains, but also has an enormous impact on the common readers. Thanks for your attention. I'm looking forward to your comments about this topic, and also your recommended ideas about my channel. Watch other videos from my channel, and if you find them useful, find this content useful, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Take care.